Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. It is Friday, November 8th, 2024, and today's topic will be a continuation of yesterday's, which was sketching a guitar from life. So we're going to still do sketching a guitar, but today we will add shading and values. So if you're returning, welcome back, and if you're new, I sketch and post every day, and I set 5-minute timers in order to build a sketching habit. So I'll go ahead and start one now, and I'll keep this video going as long as I need to kind of go over a lot of different ideas. So definitely check yesterday's video if you're not sure what's going on. It goes with the idea of beginner, intermediate, and advanced sketching. There's another video about that. But just to start off with, let me go over. So yesterday's video I did in real time. It took about 20 to 30 minutes. And you can see where I ended up with. And obviously if I'm explaining something while sketching, it's not going to turn out as accurate. But I mean, it wasn't too bad. But I spent another 30 minutes to basically get to fix some things and to get like details. So I just wanted to go over that. So if you are a beginner at drawing, don't skip over yesterday's video, like the concepts there, and don't skip over kind of what I'm going over here. So I talked about like taking some time to add like the little details, like the strings. So in yesterday's video, I didn't use a ruler for anything. I just freehanded everything. But with the strings, I went ahead and used a ruler. And I kind of knew that intuitively. So you can see that it looks okay without using a ruler. But then when you get to the strings and you use that, it just it makes it look that much cleaner. Because everything is all relative with, maybe with everything, but especially with art, everything is relative. So since I use a straight edge here for the strings, it tightens everything else. It becomes the most sort of detailed looking, if you will, or definitely like the straighter lines. The other thing is, it got a little, well, so yeah, I worked on like the forms, so it looks better that way, and like the neck of the guitar and how it attaches. So that's detail work, and the thing is, you don't want to do that first. You want to do basically what I did in yesterday's video, and then it'll be easier to put the details into it. If you do the detail first, like one thing, for example, is how the frets work. It's actually a lot more, I mean, because it's put on there on the guitar, like mathematically or logically. It's not just randomly put in there. So that wasn't that correct, the way that I divided everything, but I just wanted to make sure that I at least got the dots of the frets correctly. Also, just like how the strings, so you'll notice it's not perfect. Like it's not meant to be. It's meant to be sketchy, but it should look pretty close. And plus, when you're shading and stuff, even when I'm looking at the guitar from life, I mean, I don't see like each individual string. I just see like the impression of the strings, but it still should look correct on the guitar. And that's the other thing is, let me have a sip of coffee here. The other thing is that between where I was yesterday, let's call that the first pass, and let's call this also a continuation of the first pass. So even though I stopped and then came back and worked on it some more for like another half hour, it's still the first pass, which is the sketch. And um, so by the time you get to this point where we're going to move to shading and values, your sketch should be, you should have solved or answered any questions you might have or solved any problems you might have, and don't go any further. It's not going to be fun, and you're probably not going to have a successful picture, because it's not fun to try to fix stuff later. I mean, it happens, but it's not. So my analogy is like cooking. It's, if you have to fix it afterwards, it's not good. It's never going to be as good. If you have to add like a bunch of stuff after you cook it. So that's kind of my approach is, yeah, sometimes you have to do it, but especially if you're doing personal work where you're studying and stuff. So that's 5 minutes. I'll start another one. You want to go ahead and just take your time. I mean, since there's no one forcing you to do it. Now, sometimes I've had to fix stuff because I was on a deadline, but that's not what I'm doing these days. So yeah, so that's where we're at right here. And so over here, I said that I wanted to do some value studies, and I went ahead and just made the squares even smaller, because your value studies should be pretty small. These are thumbnails. So a value study can be any size, but I chose thumbnail size because I don't want to spend too much time overthinking it or trying to detail a study, like a value study. So let me zoom in and explain what these are, and I'll do a few more down here. So 1, I did it thumbnail size. 2, I didn't overthink it. I kind of went with some different options, and I'll talk about that in a second. And what else? I forgot what else I was going to say, but let me kind of explain what these are. So in this first one, it's just your basic like light and dark with some midtone is what I was thinking. And just because it's basic doesn't mean it's bad. So if you were to come over here, I would just kind of shade. I'll pick one side where there's light, and then just kind of work off of that. And that's a very basic approach, but it's not bad if you're drawing from imagination and you're needing to do some shading. That's probably the safest route, and it would still look good. Next, so one thing with my like the setup I have for my guitar is just set in the corner of my room here. So it's not, the lighting isn't perfect and any of that. So mainly what I got from it was what the guitar looked like is sort of the main thing. So I could decide, for example, to make the background like dark, and then have the guitar be sort of contrasted. So that was one option. Another is kind of the opposite, where I really render and make the guitar right here, make the guitar darker and have like a more lighter background. And then this one was sort of inspired by the subject itself, because of the way I have, since my light is coming from the right side here and onto the guitar, it's casting kind of an interesting shadow. But then I have like another light. So in other words, this is sort of a more interesting, if you will, light and shadow pattern, which I kind of liked. Like my initial thought was that I liked that, partly because, go ahead and zoom out, partly because it kind of fills this area with some stuff, and also it would help me to kind of cover up some of these pen marks. So that's kind of, I kind of became interested in that sort of kind of almost immediately. So over here, we'll take some of the ideas here and just kind of do a few more quick value studies. So one thing is to think about, like, what if you sort of took this, but then kind of made this will make it a little bit more moody and less about the guitar itself. So notice that because we had composed this picture like pretty good, I can just create a grid and I can sketch the guitar pretty easily because we gridded it out, like we composed it. We were methodical about it. So with that in mind, what could happen is that I can kind of do a gradation on the guitar. So that's another 5 minutes. And just kind of do it that way, where I sort of blend the guitar in with the background, kind of like that. And that could be a little bit more moody. Next, same idea, but what if you went the other way? Also, maybe less. So these are all very like creative, artistic interpretations. So with this one, you're saying light's coming from over here, from the other side. Again, because we gridded it out, we pretty much know how to draw this. So you could just do an outline and just work on this side of the guitar. Kind of like that. Another option which kind of came to me is that you could have the guitar be like that, and then have like draw some hands if you want to be kind of challenge yourself. I had this idea that you could have like a hand holding the guitar and then like strumming with this other hand. This is if you want to go towards a more illustrative, like you have an illustration in mind. And then for this, you could just keep like a basic shading, like just kind of shade in. Basically, just kind of work on the form. And then finally, maybe you could have, again, just going towards the idea of like an illustration. You could create some kind of border with some design elements like that, like whatever, and even draw like something else back here, like a scene. I don't know, but just some ideas. Now, if some of these seem interesting in and of like you would want to do maybe more than one, what I would suggest is, and I did this too, where just take a photo. So I already took a photo of this, and the thing is, you can still redraw it, and that's why sketching is so useful. One, it's a way to learn something, it's a way to study something. So for example, now that I've drawn so I've never really studied a guitar. I haven't really done like a drawing or an illustration, like not really. So, but now that I did, I understand a little bit more about like the proportion, like, and kind of do like a sketch, so I know like it's kind of like this. So I have more confidence sketching it, in other words. So I can just play around with like just different perspectives. So that's kind of how you build confidence in something. So yeah, so I have a better understanding of it. So you can see that, like, if I hadn't done the study, I wouldn't be able to more confidently like draw or sketch this out. Yeah. Alright, so moving on. Really, I mean, you have so many choices. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of go with that because, like I said, it's sort of like I kind of intuitively knew, like maybe subconsciously, what I wanted to do with it, and so I kind of sketched it in a way where like it would kind of go in this direction anyway. We'll start another 5-minute timer. And so yeah, just take a picture of this so you can, or whatever it is that you're drawing, but I mean, that's a nice use of technology because you can have a copy of it. And like I said, I mean, you can redraw it. I mean, you could redraw this. It's nicely laid out, so you can grid it if you really want to. So yeah, use your imagination for all of that. So I have an idea, a better idea, and so yeah, before I move on, so if you're a beginner, so again, going back to the idea of a beginner, intermediate, and advanced sketching, if you're a beginner, like, just make sure that your drawing, you're happy with it, and fix any issues, because going forward isn't really gonna fix your drawing. So that's why I wanted to do it this way, is that if you were to do a cleaner version of this, it would still be a good drawing, and that's the main thing. And in fact, if you just had like a nice outline, I mean, you can just color it in and it would look good, or just leave it as like a drawing, because all the good stuff is right here. So that's one thing. And I like when I'm looking at a drawing, I mean, this is really what I'm seeing. Like if I'm looking at any drawing, and it can be more abstract or more realistic, but ultimately that's what I'm looking at. This is where all the thinking happens. And with practice, you'll achieve it quicker, but that comes through, like, don't worry about how quickly you can do it. Just, like, take your time to get a good drawing. And then the next thing is that once you get to the idea of like shading, so I'm going to go over, let's say you're a beginner, like kind of a good way to approach shading to make it look, to one, enhance your drawing and not mess it up. But then if you're an intermediate artist, then that's why I wanted to show like different ideas on how to approach it, because it's a good way to gauge like where you're at, because you could have sort of like one way of doing it, and then but there are other ways of doing it. And then if you're like an advanced artist, like all of this stuff should be there, like you should know it. And then like after this video, I'm just gonna work on this, and then I'll show you where I'm at, because I'm gonna do some color studies tomorrow, and I'll show you where I'm at. Now, the difference between intermediate and advanced is very dramatic, and like to get a picture to look like extra great or extra good, like great, that's the advanced part of it. And I'll have to talk about that later, because I want to demonstrate some stuff here. So yeah, moving from kind of the beginner So beginner is stuff like just see if the shape is good, see if like the details are correct. And like I mentioned, don't add the details before getting like kind of the overall shape. It's just stuff like that. It's your observation, it's your even hand skills. So for example, I freehanded all this, but I use a straight edge for the strings. It's just see how that works. You could try to do like a straight edge on everything. I don't think it's necessary. But yeah, moving on. So in this first value study, that's like a basic. I started with the basic kind of shading, and so we'll go with that to begin with because one, it's a way to clean up the sketch. Also, part of why I even like did this part, like wasn't as careful on this side. Like I knew I could kind of shape this is because the guitar, it's dark on this side. So notice that there's light coming from over here in my life drawing setup. I have a lamp coming from this side. So that's 5 minutes. I'll start another one. But then I also kind of have like a light sort of in front of it a little bit. But like I mentioned over here, there's a shadow cast by the light that's coming from this side. And so that's what I'm going to use like the sketch lines here to kind of do, but I'm not going to do it just yet because you want this guitar to, there's some things you want to figure out like as far as like the values and the shading. So one is what I just explained here and like what the pattern here, that's the overall like value pattern. That's the overall like the light, the dark, and the shadow. And so the next thing to kind of think about is like you usually want to work, this is kind of a complex topic, but like you usually want to work in a way that you can push the dark or basically not overwork it. So before I even get to that, there's other ideas involved. So the simplest method would be to use the same pen, because if, let's say that I draw like this guitar form, and this will be a simplified, let me zoom in because I like that. Let me draw like a simplified form here. So the simplest thing would be to use the same pen to sort of not have to think about too much about like the line weight and like other things like that. So there's nothing wrong with that. Just like if you're using a pencil, the simplest thing would be just to use the same pencil. And if we go off of like the sketch that I have, I'm going to use the same pen, which means the same line weight. But let's say that I start to shade it, and let's say that I want to do what is known as kind of like the local value, which is the material itself has a certain value. So to do that, I'm going to go this way, and now let's do that again, but let's go the other way. Let's do it more like this. So notice that, notice the difference. Also, the way that you shade it also has a value to it. So if you're putting in like the local value, you want to put it in pretty even because that's the material itself. It's made of a black paint on the side of the guitar. And we're not thinking about like the shininess of it or anything because there's all that too. But first you have to like find a way to put in like the local value. And I also wanted to show how there's a difference between the direction and also like the pen that you use, the line weight that you use. So with that in mind, I will most likely use like a thinner line right here. Let me zoom out. And I'm going to just go like in the direction of, or opposite, I guess this is cross contour. So that's the technical, gonna do cross contour. And I'm keeping it pretty loose. Part of this is just style, part of it is like preference. Now, so as we do that, one is I like the look of this. Like this is kind of my sort of approach, like natural approach. That's 5 minutes. I'll start another one. And yeah, I'm not going to shade like all of it. I just wanted to go over like the concepts. So I like this. The other thing is, as you start to do this, the reason I like it is because I can kind of go either direction towards the light or the dark. Like I can kind of switch back and forth a little bit. Again, based on the picture, based on like what's interesting about the picture, because now that we've got all the information from the life drawing, we're just wanting to create an artistic picture. The next thing is that as I do this, it allows me to, if I am using reference or if I'm using my imagination, which that's why studies are good, because there's little details that about like the subject, which is this guitar here, that can only really be gotten from like the life drawing or the reference. So for example, like where the highlights might be. So I might do that and just leave this, the white of the paper. Stuff like that, and take your time. Like definitely, like you did all the hard work of drawing it, which you should take your time there also. But then once you're here, like take your time to make sure that you don't mess up the value pattern. So you have the overall value pattern right here. So I'll talk about that in just a second. But then you have like the local value, meaning that this is what this material is like, and that the highlight right there, that's the shine of the material. That's how you can get it to look like it's actually a different material. It's because of the reflections and the shine and stuff like that. So hopefully that makes sense. And as you're doing that, you're going to use the shading to further refine like the shape, like further refine the picture. You could be more careful as far as like the sketching, like I did. I kept saying you can use a pencil so you can erase. Part of why I do it the way that I do it is I kind of intuitively know how I'm going to shade it. Like I already knew that I could be like this because I probably was going to draw some stuff. Like I kind of knew that. The other thing is that once you draw like a lot, put in like who knows how many hours, years of drawing, you kind of want to do something spontaneous, like because the happy accidents is really like where the fun is. But I mean, if you just rely on that to begin with, I mean, you're going to have so many failed attempts that it might discourage you from continuing, I guess. So at this point, yeah, like if you decide like I'm going to use this pen, then just stick with this to shade with. Because as soon as you switch to like, so this is like a fine point, if you switch to the medium, with the shading, it's going to throw off your values because, again, our example here, let's just do a couple more. Let's just do like simple box. It's easier to draw. So even if I do the exact same kind of thing, but I use different pens, like there's subtle differences. And again, for simplicity, you might just go ahead and stick with the same pen. But you can get more subtlety using different line width. If you do use like this, you can fix a lot more stuff too. But yeah, I would just stick with the one, and then you can fix, like make it look more detailed and fix issues with the drawing. So that's one thing. And yeah, it'll be a little bit more nuanced. So that's one thing I wanted to go over. The other thing is like, so it's especially important when you're talking about like the shadows and stuff. So I'm gonna go with this idea. That's another 5 minutes. I'll start another one. We're getting to the end of the video. So what I'm going to do, for example, is so in this thumbnail, there's a shadow right here, and that's what gave me the idea for that study, the thumbnail itself. And I like it. I mean, I think it's interesting. It kind of replicates the shape, but it's a shadow, so it gives it interest, it gives it form, and then I can kind of, like I noticed, for example, there's like a shadow across the guitar and stuff, and so it kind of gives me more visual interest. So the way to do that, so that's the like the global value, if you want to call it that, whereas like this was like the local value. So this is the value of the material itself. Which again, kind of like the way that we set up the drawing, you can use this as kind of a guide for everything else. So there's a shadow that's going across here, and you kind of have to ask yourself like this, like what direction like do you want to go in? And it doesn't matter because you can see that it looks different. Partly is like I could have shaded it this way, but when you're doing line, and it's also the same with, so in painting this would be more towards like edges rather than lines, but it's the same principle. So I'm going to kind of sketch out. Now, at the end of the day, you just kind of have to experiment. And you can't go too wrong if you kind of follow sort of a method, and then you'll kind of know like what looked good and what didn't. So I'm going to sketch out like where the shadow is, and part of what's going on is that I already kind of had sketch lines, so I'm going to go that way. And then I'm going to turn the page and just kind of do an even kind of shading. So part of this is because of the thumbnail that I had, the shadow that's in the life drawing, and also the style, like the look of it, like it looks interesting to me. And then once I do this, I'm just going to decide like, okay, I'm going to do this for like the shadow, like the background area. And I notice that there's some right here. So I'm just going to do that for like, so So you can see that it already starts to look interesting. And then I'll just do kind of like this. So this would be called like the second pass. And if you're drawing a picture that's kind of big like this, like bigger than, let's say, like something small or like a thumbnail, you kind of want to have a plan. I mean, it makes it more enjoyable. And so now for the shadow that's being cast by the guitar, I might decide to not really outline it and just kind of look at the subject and just sort of do this kind of thing. So part of this is going to be fixing like how I have like sketch lines here. So basically I'm going to make up some stuff, but like there is a shadow being cast right here, but I'm going to sort of make up so I can fix this sketch line, and I'm going to go in the direction of like the other ones. Part of that is because there were already some sketch lines. Like I'm just kind of working with what I have already. So you can see that this is stylized because I'm just going off of what I had, like the sketch lines I had already like put down, but it's also coming off of the shadow that's in the subject. So that's 5 minutes. I'm gonna start another one and like wrap this up, or maybe just kind of do my outro, as they say. So basically that's how I'm going to develop this picture, and that's an intermediate, sort of giving you how to go from a beginner, which again you might just focus. So as a beginner you might not worry so much about, I would think about like the local value if you're just beginning. So what I mean is, think about where the highlights are. So that's a highlight when I'm looking at the guitar, like that's a highlight. So think about shading evenly. Think about like the stuff I talked about here, like what direction to shade it and like what kind of pen to use, and like why. Think about like local value. So this. So these areas are the darkest on the guitar. That's what I would do, and then just kind of work on the guitar and like just kind of like the details. So for example, within here, I would shade it, but then kind of show some of the highlights on the strings. So these are things that, from an intermediate standpoint, you would just do pretty quickly. Like you would know pretty quickly, okay, like that's what I need to work on. And like you would make any kind of adjustments. But then from here to making like, I guess, an image that like really pops out, like, you know, like really stands out, that's for like the advanced kind of sketching. Which is not to say that if you were to do this really well, like it wouldn't, like in a basic way, like it wouldn't look good. I mean, there is some mystery involved here. Like I can't completely explain like every mystery of art. I'm just kind of talking about the stuff that you can work on, but then there's kind of a leap of faith part, which is kind of a topic for another video. So yeah, like part of this, if you get some kind of accidental nice effects, then I would just keep it. And so yeah, I think this kind of covered the beginner aspects of it, a lot of kind of basic concepts that go into it. part of why planning is important is, one, there's different ideas. I didn't arrive at this idea like immediately, and also when you're studying and you're practicing, and then once you get to know like the subject, then you can just kind of, you'll have like stuff in your toolbox. And then yeah, I'm gonna work on this and see where I end up. Whether you're following along like with the guitar or with like some other subject, I mean, it's still the same difference. So for example, the concepts that I'm using here is the same as like, so I did like more sketching of this character. It's the same thing. Like, it doesn't matter. It's drawing. So yeah, as I wrap up this video, I want to thank you for joining me today for our daily sketching routine. If you like these videos, please support the channel. I always appreciate that. And until next time, keep on sketching.